The late afternoon sun painted long, golden shadows across the stone courtyard of Buckingham Palace. Tourists buzzed with excitement, cameras clicking and voices echoing off the historic walls. Yet, amidst the hum of movement and chatter stood an immovable figure, guard Lucian Redgrave. Clad in the iconic scarlet tunic and tall bearskin hat, Redgrave looked every bit the emblem of royal tradition. But beneath the polished brass buttons and stoic posture was a seasoned veteran. With 15 years of military service, including 3 harrowing tours in Afghanistan, Redgrave understood that his job as a royal guard was far more than ceremonial stillness. Vigilance wasn't in standing alone, it was in observing quietly. Noticing the quiet shifts, the subtle unease, the human stories behind the crowd, his training had taught him to remain still, but never blind. His eyes, though never wandering, noticed everything. Today, something tugged gently at his attention. Near the eastern gate, a young mother and her son had arrived, their faces alight with excitement. She looked to be in her 30s, wearing a bright red coat. Her son, no older than 7, clutched her hand tightly, practically bouncing with joy. If you enjoy this content, I would really appreciate it if you could give it a like and subscribe to my channel. Your subscription means a lot to me and gives me great motivation to make more videos. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the video. From his post, Redgrave couldn't turn to stare. But he didn't need to. His years had trained his peripheral vision to be razor sharp. He noted the matching smiles, the care with which the mother adjusted her son's collar, the way she kept him close despite the relatively calm crowd. It was the kind of body language that spoke volumes, not just protection, but deep, instinctive love. This was a family savoring a special day, unaware that it would soon become unforgettable, for all the wrong reasons. "Mommy, look how tall they are." The boy's voice rang out, high and clear in the courtyard. Redgrave heard the delighted tone, felt the ripple of soft chuckles from nearby onlookers. The child's wonder was infectious, a reminder of how even the most disciplined environments can ignite a sense of magic for the young. "Their hats make them look like giants," the boy added, eyes wide as he took in the guards in their full regalia. His mother smiled warmly, squeezing his hand. "That's because they're protecting something very special," she said, her voice gentle yet reverent. "The royal guards protect not just the palace, but hundreds of years of history." The boy's expression shifted, wonder mixing with solemnity. "Is that why they don't move? Because they're guarding everything?" Redgrave, still and unmoving, felt a quiet sense of pride flicker in his chest. He'd heard many conversations over the years, people gawking, laughing, even mocking the guards. But this? This was different. The boy was trying to understand. "Yes," the mother replied. "It's their duty. They stay strong and still, no matter what's happening around them." Redgrave didn't smile, that would break protocol, but internally, he appreciated the respect in her words. The ceremonial stillness may have looked like performance to many, but it was built on the back of real discipline, real danger, and real responsibility. The moment might have passed quietly like so many others, a sweet exchange in a day full of tourist chatter. But Redgrave couldn't shake the feeling. Something about that mother and son struck him. Not just their words, but their presence, and in a few moments, that feeling would become far more than intuition. The courtyard continued to fill, a human tide swelling with every passing minute. A tour bus had just arrived, unloading dozens of eager visitors, many scrambling for position near the gates. The excitement was building. It was nearly time for the changing of the guard, one of the palace's most popular daily spectacles. Alex, the little boy, held tightly to his mother's hand. But the crowd was becoming more forceful, more chaotic. "Stay close, darling," his mother said, her voice now edged with concern. She pulled him nearer, her grip firm. Redgrave's gaze remained fixed forward, but his awareness was sharp. He'd seen this before, a peaceful gathering rapidly tipping into chaos, not from ill intent, but sheer human momentum. People, eager for photos and stories, unknowingly became dangerous. A tall man pushed past Alex and his mother, hoisting a camera over his head. Behind him came a crush of other tourists, all focused on their view. The current of bodies tightened like a wave breaking, unpredictable, unstoppable. Alex's hand, once so secure, began to slip. "I won't let go," he had promised her. But the force of the crowd didn't ask permission. Backpacks bumped, elbows jostled, and then, it happened. A sudden shove from behind knocked Alex's mother off balance. Her fingers slid away from his, "Mommy." His cry was sharp, panicked, "I'm here. Just hold on." She shouted back, trying desperately to reach him. But another surge of tourists carried her in the opposite direction. Alex disappeared into the blur of legs, bags, and unfamiliar faces. The crowd didn't even notice, but Redgrave did. He had seen the boy's blue jumper vanish into the mass. He had heard the mother's voice fracture into fear, and in that moment, his oath to protect something far greater than just stone walls began to take on an entirely new meaning. Alex was small, smaller than the tourists pressing around him, and in mere seconds, the sea of people had swallowed him. He tried to stop, to turn around, but every attempt to move backwards only pushed him further forward. His mother's voice was growing fainter, "Just one more sound in a tidal wave of noise. Has anyone seen my son? He's 7 years old. Wearing a blue jumper. Please." Her voice cracked with desperation. It cut through the crowd like a distress flare, but few truly understood what they were hearing. Some paused, heads turning, realizing something was wrong. Others barely noticed, too consumed by the spectacle unfolding near the palace gates. Alex was trying to be brave, he really was. But everything around him was too loud, too big, and moving too fast. The world that just moments ago had felt magical now felt overwhelming and unfamiliar. Strangers' knees brushed his face, backpacks swung dangerously close to knocking him over, and no one saw him. No one noticed the boy being swept away. He remembered what his mom had told him about getting lost. "Stay where you are. Find someone in uniform. Look for help." But how do you do that when you're 7, scared, and surrounded by 1,000 distracted adults? Tears started to blur his vision. The palace, the guards, the excitement, it all faded behind the rising panic in his chest, and still, from his post, Redgrave did not move. But he saw everything. Every subtle shift. Every flicker of fear. This wasn't just a lost child anymore, it was a situation that could turn dangerous, fast. Somewhere in the crush of the crowd, Alex's breathing grew shallow. He was panicking now, the sounds too loud, the people too tall, the space too unfamiliar. His little heart pounded so hard he could barely hear anything else, but then, through the blur of tears and noise, something caught his eye. Red, not just any red, that red. Bright, bold, immovable. The red of the royal guard's tunic. The same figure he'd pointed out earlier, the one Mommy had said protected everything important. There he stood, just as still as before. Unshaken. Untouched by the chaos surrounding him. To Alex, that uniform had become more than just ceremony. It was safety. It was something he recognized. Something real. One trembling step at a time, Alex began to move toward it. The crowd didn't make it easy, bodies shifted unpredictably, adults stepped without looking, camera sticks whipped by his head. A woman's purse nearly knocked him off balance, and someone even stepped on his foot without noticing. Still, he pressed forward. Through the maze of legs and voices, he focused on the gleam of brass buttons catching the sunlight, a tiny lighthouse in a storm. That guard hadn't moved an inch. In a world that felt like it was spinning out of control, Redgrave was an anchor. "I can do it," Alex whispered to himself, wiping his face with his sleeve. One step. Then another. And with every shaky footfall, the red figure grew closer, but just as he neared the edge of the crowd, just as he could almost see the guard's face clearly, a new danger appeared. "Boy, what have we got here then? The voice came from just over Alex's shoulder, slurred, loud, and uncomfortably close. Alex froze. A man towered over him, his eyes red, his breath reeking of alcohol. He wobbled slightly as he leaned down, grinning in a way that wasn't friendly. "Lost, are ya? Don't worry, Uncle Tommy'll help you find your mum." His hand reached out and gripped Alex's arm. "Not gently." "No, please," Alex stammered, instinctively pulling back. But the man's fingers clamped tighter. "Don't be like that, eh?" "I'm trying to help you," the man muttered, his grin turning hard, his eyes darting toward the silent figure of Redgrave nearby. Even drunk, something in the way the guard stood unnerved him. He laughed, but it was a nervous one. The crowd around them was only just beginning to notice. A few people glanced over. An elderly woman furrowed her brow. But no one moved. No one intervened. That strange paralysis that happens in public moments, that hesitation between noticing and acting, kept them frozen. Alex, small and frightened, tried again. "You're hurting me." He whimpered, tears returning. Then the man raised his hand. It wasn't a friendly gesture. The world seemed to pause, even the noisy crowd faded for a heartbeat, and just as the blow was about to land, the guard moved. After what felt like an eternity of stillness, Redgrave broke from his post in one fluid, shockingly fast motion. He was suddenly no longer a figure in a uniform, but a trained soldier, honed by war and discipline. His white-gloved hand gripped the man's wrist with a precision that only military training could deliver. "Release the boy." The words weren't loud, but they carried a weight that froze the moment entirely. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. This wasn't just a guard anymore, this was a guardian. The crowd had stilled. The drunken man's raised hand hovered midair, caught between bravado and realization. Redgrave stood before him now, no longer a motionless ornament of tradition, but a soldier, sharp and alert, his gloved grip unshakable. "I said, release the boy," he repeated, voice even, but edged with steel. The man, taken aback by the sudden transformation, tried to laugh it off. "Easy there, toy soldier. Just help in the kid." Redgrave didn't flinch. He applied precise pressure to the man's wrist, and the drunk gasped as his fingers involuntarily sprang open. Alex stumbled backward, immediately shielded behind the guard's imposing frame. Redgrave moved without excess, without fury, just pure, calculated force. His body became a living wall between the child and danger. Some tourists began filming, but most simply stared, struck by the authority and calm radiating from the guard. The myths of the unmoving, unfeeling soldier were dissolving before their eyes. This was different. The drunk's embarrassment turned to rage. He stepped forward, fists clenched, but hesitated. Redgrave's posture wasn't just military, it was battlefield ready. There was no bluster, no threat, only certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from facing real violence and never blinking. "You can't touch me. You lot are just decoration." The man spat. That was his mistake. In one smooth motion, Redgrave used the man's momentum to flip him into a controlled restraint. The crowd gasped again, some stepping back, others clapping. It was as clean as it was final. "On your knees," Redgrave commanded, calm as ever. The man, suddenly sobering, complied. Palace security was already approaching, and the Queen's Guard, still in full ceremonial dress, hadn't broken composure once. As the man was taken into custody, the crowd began to murmur, a mix of relief, awe, and admiration. Redgrave turned, his movements precise, and knelt down to Alex's level. The contrast was striking. This soldier, who had just subdued a grown man with ease, now addressed the small, trembling child with the gentleness of a father. "You're safe now," he said quietly, white-gloved hand resting lightly on Alex's shoulder. Alex nodded, tears still streaking his cheeks, but his breath was steadier. His gaze didn't leave the guard's face. For him, Redgrave wasn't just a protector, he was something larger than life. A real guardian. "Can you tell me your mum's name?" Redgrave asked, scanning the crowd. Alex sniffled. Sarah. Sarah Bennett. She was wearing a red coat. We were just looking at the guards. Redgrave nodded, understanding in his eyes. It's not your fault, he said, his voice firm but kind. Sometimes even the strongest hands get pulled apart. Redgrave signaled discreetly to a palace security officer nearby, who relayed the mother's name and description through his radio. A search began instantly. You'll stay with me until she's found, Redgrave told the boy. No one will harm you. Alex's grip on Redgrave's tunic tightened. He didn't want to let go again, and Redgrave didn't intend to make him. A few minutes passed. The crowd, now hushed, had created space around the pair, a circle of respect. People no longer saw just a boy and a guard, they saw something sacred, the moment where duty became deeply human. A young tour guide approached. Guard Redgrave, she offered softly, I can take the child to the visitor center. That won't be necessary, Redgrave replied gently but firmly. He stays with me. The guide nodded, quietly moved by the protectiveness in his tone, and then, a voice, distant, hoarse, and desperate, Alex. Alex, where are you? Alex's head whipped around. Mommy? Redgrave stood and lifted the boy effortlessly into his arms, placing him high enough to be seen above the heads of the crowd. He held him securely, one arm locked with soldierly control, the other scanning the surroundings. There, someone whispered, pointing. A woman in a red coat was sprinting forward, her face stained with tears. Alex cried out, Mommy. I'm here. With the guard. The crowd instinctively parted, letting her through. She reached them in seconds, scooping Alex from Redgrave's arms and clinging to him as if she'd never let go again. The moment was raw and quiet. No applause. Just relief, and gratitude. She looked up at Redgrave, eyes shining. Thank you. Thank you for protecting my son. Redgrave stood tall, face solemn, posture respectful. Your son showed great courage, ma'am, he said. He found help. He did exactly what he should. And then, just for a second, the unflinching guard allowed the barest flicker of a smile. The courtyard had transformed. What had been a place of excitement and spectacle only minutes earlier now felt like sacred ground. The tourists remained respectfully distant, moved not just by the reunion, but by the realization of what they had witnessed. Alex clung to his mother. His small arms locked tightly around her neck. His words tumbled out through relieved sobs. I was so scared, Mommy. There were too many people. And a man tried to grab me, but the guard saved me. Sarah held her son closer, pressing kisses to his forehead as tears streamed down her face. You're safe now. I've got you. I'll never let go again. She looked up at Redgrave, her voice catching. I don't know how to thank you. Redgrave stood in quiet dignity. You don't have to, ma'am. A guard's duty is to protect. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. His actions had already spoken volumes. Just then, two uniformed police officers approached, having been briefed on the situation. One of them spoke gently, Ma'am, we'll need a quick statement from you and your son. Just to make sure everything's properly documented. Sarah nodded. Of course. She glanced again at Redgrave. Please. Will you stay? I'll be right here, he replied. Alex turned to him from his mother's arms. You moved so fast. Like a superhero. But better, 'cause you're real. And in that moment, Redgrave, the silent, stoic figure of British tradition, became something far more to everyone watching. The officers began asking questions, careful not to overwhelm Alex. Sarah answered what she could, grateful for every second she had her son back in her arms. Redgrave remained close, standing a few paces back, not intruding, but present. Watchful. Ready, if needed. One officer turned to him. "Sir, your response was exemplary. Thank you. We'll be noting your conduct in the report." Redgrave gave a quiet nod. But he wasn't thinking about reports or recognition. His thoughts were still on the boy, how close he'd come to danger, how fragile those few minutes had been. The female tour guide approached again, more confident this time. "Is it true you're not supposed to leave your post under any circumstance?" Redgrave didn't hesitate. "Tradition matters. But some things matter more." That statement echoed silently through those who heard it. Here was a man trained to follow the strictest protocol, whose every movement, or lack of movement, symbolized centuries of tradition. And yet, he had broken that stillness in the exact moment it mattered most, not for glory, not for attention, but for a child in need. The lesson wasn't lost on anyone. With the situation stabilized and the drunk man in custody, the palace began returning to its usual rhythm. Tourists who had witnessed the incident lingered quietly, still affected by what they'd seen. Some held their own children a little closer. Others simply stood in quiet reflection. Alex, now calmer, nestled in his mother's embrace. But his eyes stayed on Redgrave, wide, full of admiration. There was something healing in seeing him there, silent and composed, like nothing had ever happened. The boy suddenly wriggled free from his mother's arms, walked up to Redgrave, and reached out to touch the scarlet fabric of his tunic, the very color he had followed through the storm. "Thank you, Guard Redgrave. I'll never forget you." Redgrave looked down at him and offered the smallest of smiles, a soft crack in his ceremonial armor. "You were brave," he said quietly. "That matters more than anything else." And then, without a word, Alex straightened, placed his heels together, and gave his version of a salute. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't precise, but it was pure. Redgrave returned to his formal position, rifle held upright, posture flawless. Yet, something had shifted. This wasn't just the return to routine, it was the continuation of duty, now understood by everyone who had witnessed it not just as a performance, but as a sacred vow. The police had what they needed. The threat had been removed. The child was safe. Yet, Guard Redgrave remained exactly where he was, not just because he had returned to his post, but because his presence now meant something greater. He had not simply subdued a threat or followed instinct. He had shown the world what it meant to truly protect, not a building, not a tradition, but a human life. Alex hadn't moved far. Though now back in his mother's arms, he kept glancing toward the tall figure in red. Where once he saw a living statue, now he saw a man, one who had stepped out of stillness to shield him without hesitation. Sarah Bennett, eyes still glassy from tears, turned to the officer beside her. "He saved my son." The guard didn't wait. He knew. The officer nodded, writing in his notebook. "It'll all go into the report. But I suspect this will be remembered far beyond paperwork." The crowd had begun to thin, but those still gathered were quieter now, reflective. Many hadn't come for this kind of moment. They had expected photos of stiff soldiers and funny poses, not a glimpse into what real duty looks like when stripped of pomp. One man in the crowd, a father himself, bent down to speak softly to his own daughter. "That's what a hero looks like." Across the courtyard, Redgrave scanned the area from the corner of his eye. Every fiber of his being remained alert, though his face showed nothing. He wasn't looking for praise. He was ensuring no danger remained. He knew the incident would fade eventually. The drunk man would be charged and forgotten. Tourists would return. Guards would march. But for one boy, and for everyone who had truly seen what happened, the image of that moment would remain. Not every act of courage requires noise. Some arrived dressed in silence and scarlet. A quiet buzz came through Redgrave's earpiece. Palace communications confirming that the suspect was in custody and being processed. No further threat. Situation handled, but even as those official boxes were checked, Redgrave remained close. Not by rule, by choice, Alex, still nestled against his mother's shoulder, looked up at her and whispered, "Do you think he'll remember me?" She smiled gently and kissed his hair. "I think he always will. Just like you'll remember him." As if on cue, Redgrave stepped forward one last time, not out of formality, but from something personal. "The officers may reach out again," he said calmly to Sarah. "For updates or testimony." She nodded. "Of course." Then, after a small pause, she added, "There are no words strong enough, but thank you. Truly. For seeing him. For acting." Redgrave stood in composed silence. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quieter, but no less firm. "Some lines must never be crossed. And some people are worth breaking protocol for." Alex reached out a hand again, and this time Redgrave knelt. "Eye level once more." "You kept moving," Redgrave said, "even when it was scary. That's what bravery is." The boy looked down shyly, then asked, "Will you go back to standing still now?" Redgrave gave the faintest nod. "For now. But I'll still be watching. Always." It was a simple promise, but to Alex, it was everything. Before stepping back into position, Redgrave touched the boy's shoulder, just once, with his white-gloved hand. A quiet gesture of reassurance. Of farewell. Sarah and Alex turned to go, guided gently by police toward the visitor center for final formalities. But before they disappeared into the shifting crowd, Alex twisted back and shouted, "Thank you, Guard Redgrave. I'll tell everyone you're not just a statue." Laughter, soft and genuine, rippled through the remaining onlookers, and Redgrave, once more at full attention, allowed the smallest smile to curve the edge of his lips. As the sun began its slow descent behind the palace spires, the courtyard slowly returned to normal. The rhythmic shuffle of guards on patrol, the hum of distant conversations, the snapping of camera shutters, all resumed, yet something had changed. Every tourist who had witnessed the scene walked away with more than pictures. They left with a story. One not just about a lost boy, or a brave guard, or even a mother's love, but about why duty matters most when it breaks the mold it's shaped in. Redgrave resumed his post like nothing had happened. His posture was flawless. His rifle rested just as the regulations demanded. His face, impassive once again. But those who had seen it, those who truly understood, could sense something deeper now. Behind the polished brass and ceremonial stillness stood a protector. A real one. Not a performer in uniform. Not just a keeper of tradition. But a man who had served in real combat zones. A man whose instinct wasn't to freeze when danger called, but to act. Quietly. Decisively. Completely. He hadn't moved to impress. He hadn't intervened for applause, he had moved because a child was in danger. And because no uniform, no protocol, no ancient ceremony should ever stop someone from doing what is right, tourists left the palace that day with more than souvenirs. They left with something personal, a memory that would become a story told at dinner tables, in classrooms, across conversations, and in the quiet stillness of that red-coated figure now standing guard once again, they saw something eternal, that sometimes, real strength is silent. That the most powerful protection isn't in polished boots or stiff posture, but in choosing, without hesitation, to stand between danger and the innocent, and that sometimes, a guard doesn't just guard tradition, he guards humanity. If you enjoy this content, I would really appreciate it if you could give it a like and subscribe to my channel. Your subscription means a lot to me and gives me great motivation to make more videos. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the video.